Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, H.O.A. stole my property while I was abroad, claim they're the new owners. I was given an amazing opportunity at work where I could spend an entire year abroad. Almost everyone in the company applied for this thing and I got it over everyone else. I was over the moon about it and accepted before I started my journey across the Atlantic. Of course, the one thing that I needed to make sure was going to be okay while I was gone was my house. I was only going for a year, so selling it would have been a crazy idea. Besides, one of the perks of the year of work abroad was that the company was actually paying for me living expenses there. I could just continue to pay my monthly mortgage online and hire people for the general upkeep. It was supposed to be a great plan. While I was gone though, a bunch of things happened that I didn't get to know about for the entire year. I am going to tell you the things as they happened across that year instead of how I found it all out within a couple of days of moving back. It turned out that once I left and the H.O.A. got wind of it, they were very excited about the potentially empty house. This was a horrible H.O.A. that liked everything from the length of your grass to the placement of your mailbox to be just as they want it. It is really annoying, but to avoid conflict I just tried to maintain things how they asked and stay out of their way. The person that I hired to mow my lawn, I guess, decided since I wasn't there, he didn't really need to come every month since I was paying him without being able to even see the lawn. My guess was he was going to only take care of the lawn for a few months before I came back and then get paid for the entire year. A much shorter side story could honestly be written about this guy and how he tried to manipulate the fact I wasn't there. Without the maintenance of my lawn, the H.O.A. went crazy and started shoving fines in my mailbox. I have no idea why they were doing this and trying to contact me like this. Even when I got back, they admitted to knowing I was gone for the entire year. That was the first sign to me that something was really suspicious. They knowingly tried to contact me in a way that wouldn't work and then kept fining me more and more. Again, I didn't know all of this until way later when I actually had to get my mail from the post office because when I got home it was crazy. Anyway, after a while of me receiving these fines, I didn't know about and not paying them, the H.O.A. decided to go one step further. They put a lien on my house despite not having any right to do so. At least in my neighborhood, the H.O.A. can give fines and at the worst take you to court to get their money. I had been paying my monthly mortgage still and the bank seemed to have no idea what the H.O.A. was doing with my house. All of my things that I left were removed and put in a storage facility. All of which they told me with another letter being sent in the house that I clearly wasn't living in. This is around the time of the story that I got home from my wonderful year abroad to see the mess that was unfolding. The shock when I get out of my cab and try to open my door only to find that my locks don't work. Then to notice on my lawn there is a sign stating the house is for sale. I had no clue what to do and it was about 2 in the morning with me not knowing what to do. I was lucky enough to have a friend that was still awake and let me sleep on his couch until I could get things figured out. I honestly thought the bank did it and planned to make it my first stop. When I learned they had no idea my house was up for sale, I had started asking around if anybody knew anything. Of course, that was when I found the head of the H.O.A. and they told me the entire story of the fines and putting a lien on my house. She said it so nonchalantly too, like it was no big deal, that she just tried to steal my home and sell it for what I assume would be personal profit. I told her that she had no right to try and sell my home, and that was when she hit me with the most insulting thing so far. She told me that if I wasn't going to be around to take care of my house and property, then the H.O.A. legally owned it and could do what they wanted. I have no idea what this lady was on. I just knew I needed a lawyer, and I needed one like yesterday. I found one who basically told me what I already knew about the property being mine and the H.O.A. having no claim to it. The only thing they were allowed to do was take me to court for the fines, in which they would learn of my absence and be able to contact me abroad. It was way too late for that though, so I was going to sue them for every last penny I could get away with. I mean, I don't know much about law, but I feel like stealing an entire house is kind of a big deal. Until it was dealt with though, they couldn't sell the house, but I also couldn't go and live in it again yet. Biggest shout out to my friend who let me stay with him while all of this went down. That guy is getting tacos on me for the rest of his life. When we finally got to speak to a judge about all of this, I was ready with my lawyer and all the paperwork that showed I never missed a payment on my house. As well as proof I was abroad and unaware of anything happening until I got back and saw my home for sale. I am good at reading people and could tell that the judge was angry but trying to not really let it show. The H.O.A. lawyer tried to claim that what they did was for the good of the neighborhood and an unmaintained property can be assumed abandoned and resold. Nobody was buying that story though. In the end I was going to get my money back for all of the mortgage I paid on the house while they were reaping the benefit of trying to sell it. As well as pain and suffering, moving expenses, and of course every single fine they gave me was thrown out. In the end it was $475,000 that the H.O.A. lost to me, and I got to get my life back on track again. It was a pain moving all of my stuff back in, but I was mainly just happy to have my house back. If anybody knows the feeling of getting to come back home after a long vacation, imagine that lasting almost a year and a half. It really was the thing that calmed me down so much I stopped caring about the H.O.A. Besides losing that much money really hurt them, and while they still exist in name, I don't think there is anybody running it anymore. The funds just are not there, and when there is no money incentive suddenly the very concerned citizens don't seem to care. And for anyone wondering, yes, I gave my wonderful friend some of that money to count for rent while I was living with him. I wasn't going to give him only tacos after all he did for me. Moral of the story is if you can take a trip abroad for a year, I highly recommend it. Maybe just have a person keeping an eye out on your home while you are gone. The next story is titled, Call the Police? Sure. In our mid-20s my husband and I purchased and moved into our rather modest first house with our infant daughter. I made a big effort to meet and befriend our neighbors, and all of them warned me to be careful of one particular person, Jane. Jane had lived in the street for 3 years at this point and had earned herself the nickname, Big Fat Jane, as she was manipulating, intimidating and thoroughly awful. Jane ran a daycare from her house, but neighbors on both sides reported hearing her scream at the children and leave them unsupervised in the garden. It's important to note that Jane's partner is a police officer. The neighbors were scared of retaliation if they reported her or stood up to her. It seemed Jane would use this to get away with her horrific behavior. Our house had a driveway with a dropped curb big enough for one car, but we could fit both if you blocked in the first and only used the second car. Parking on the street was very limited, and we had double yellow lines outside our house, not allowed to stop, park there. During some essential roof work our driveway was taken up by scaffolding and a skip, so we parked in the street and my husband parked outside BFJ's house. The next day when he went to his car, BFJ came running down her path shouting at him. She screamed about his antisocial parking, that his car would be towed and that he could expect it to be scratched up if he left it there any longer. My husband calmly explained it was a public road and she had not right to police the space. Her screeches at this point were loud enough that I, and several neighbors heard, and came to see the commotion. Her partner was perched at the door during all of this, saying and doing nothing. When she saw me on pavement with our daughter she pointed and screamed, "You'll have the social on you if you don't duck off. I'll scratch you right up." At this point I told my husband to come back and we were calling the police. She responded, "Call the police. I ducking dare you. He's," pointing at her partner, "a policeman. He'll ducking sort you out. You won't know what hit you." At this point my husband looked at her husband and said, "Is that right? And you're agreeing with what she said?" The partner nodded and said, "You need to move or accept the consequences. You call the police, it won't get you anywhere." Funnily, when I then took out my phone and dialed the non-police emergency number, on speakerphone, and made a police report, both of them looked a lot less confident. BFJ stood there open-mouthed, then grabbed her partner and slammed the door. And we haven't heard from her since. Her partner was placed on suspension due to the allegation, and further allegations from our neighbors. He then returned to an admin role. After our confrontation BFJ was given a warning for a public order offense. However, due to a number of reports her daycare closed and she is no longer able to mind children. Their house is up for sale, however, as she made a number of modifications without proper planning or works. Its price is significantly lower than they expected and they're in negative equity. All because of a parking space. The next story is titled, "Fine, I'll water the flowers." So, where I'm from, a H.O.A. isn't really a thing. For the fortunate ones among us, however, who live in an apartment building, get something similar. A council of sorts who vote on what we can all split the budget on for maintenance, and that makes the decisions about what cannot be done on the outside of the building. Naturally, what should be an objective and reasonable discussion is known to turn rather petty. Everyone wants to fix their thing first, after all, and to hell with the rest. There's been more than one instance of, you want to place an AC unit outside? Well, first we'll have to do X. Naturally, the person making that demand would later place their own AC outside, after it's been approved by everyone. So, I'm not going to point any fingers to who's guilty here. I'm just to recount the story. So, my mother, like everyone else in the meeting, had gathered a whole list of bullet points of things that needed to be done. In the hopes of getting only a couple done, really. There were points she didn't really care that much about, but if they were another thing she was willing to forget about in order to have something done she did want, then that was all that mattered. One of those things was our outside tap. Now, we're not the only ones with an outside tap, but we are the only ones with a small path to the front of the building. Remember that it's important. However, something with these taps, they're separate from the inside taps, is broken. We believe it may be a filter or something, or maybe the pipes are just bust, but one thing is clear, the water reeks. It's like someone has pulled stagnant water out of the swamp, right next to an exhaust pipe above a McDonald's. Supposedly it's fine, but it doesn't smell like it's fine. So of course, when we need water outside, we usually just use the tap water inside. Now for the malicious compliance. So, the meeting starts, and everyone of course starts listing off their own respective issues. And she ends up in an argument with another resident over a couple issues. Eventually the resident comes up with the fact that with the heat wave, the little garden in front of our residence is completely wilted. And that with us being the only one with easy driveway access, it should be our responsibility to keep them watered. Of course, my mom was a little bit peeved, since none of her demands were being listened to, and now they had the audacity to make demands of her. However, the gears of malicious compliance were already ticking. She asked that if she did it, if something else could be arranged. Apparently not thinking anything of the sudden friendly smile, an agreement was made, and the meeting concluded as all meetings do, still disgruntled and no one happy. Except her, of course. The next day with a smile, she pulls out the garden hose and plugs it in the outside tap. Strides all the way up to the front of the building, and then, let loose. From a distance everything probably seemed fine. If you got closer though, you'd believe that the building might actually be retrofitted to serve as the local toxic waste recycling area, as the hose was directly linked to Satan's garden faucet. The water forming a thick, smelly barrier that I heard later on drafted upwards. Straight to the other residents' building just as well. This only seemed helped by the summer heat, causing it all to evaporate rather than sink away in the soil, lasting almost all day, which turned into a 24/7 haze as she wanted to make sure the flowers would survive the heat, of course. The next meeting, she was politely requested to stop watering the flowers. And now they're considering finally fixing those taps. The last story is titled, "Just a Little Height Difference." I can remember this event clearly. The family laughed about this for years. The year was 1985. Dad just brought home a brand new car. A 1985 Caprice Classic. Mom and Dad picked it out together weeks ago and he just picked it up from the dealership. We went for a drive so they could show off the new car to us kids and some close friends who were excited for my parents. Dad had an old 1/2 ton he drove to work and back, so the car was left with Mom most days. Some days she drove it but others she didn't need to go anywhere, so it sat in the driveway. Now here I will mention there is a huge height difference between Mom and Dad. Dad was roughly 6 feet 5 inches and Mom was roughly 5 feet 2 inches. Needless to say, the driver's seat needed to be moved for each of them. Dad got petty one day and pulled one of his little pranks on Mom. He took the car to work one day, which was not unusual if he didn't feel like driving his truck. While he had it at work, he welded the driver's seat where he feels comfortable and never said a thing to Mom. Probably 2 or 3 days later Mom had to go to a doctor appointment or something like it. When she got in the car, she tried adjusting the seat. But it never budged. She came in the house and asked me to go look to see if I can figure out what was wrong. As soon as I looked at the track where the seat should slide, I see the weld. I pointed it out to Mom. When Mom got mad, she always looked like she just ate 30 lemons and she gets quiet. When she went quiet when I was a kid, I knew it was about to go down. She went into her bedroom and grabbed pillows to put behind her so she reaches the pedals. By the time she got to the appointment she had the most sour look on her face. We left the appointment and I thought we would be heading home, but we started in a different direction. I didn't dare ask where. I just sat back for the ride and shut my mouth. After a few kilometers I realized, we were heading to Uncle Ernie's place. This is where we brought Dad's work truck to get fixed and Mom's uncle. Mom got out of the car and showed Uncle Ernie where Dad welded the seat all the way back. He kind of giggled and asked what she wanted him to do about it. Mom told him to cut off the gas and brake pedals and weld something on them so her feet can reach the pedals with the seat all the way back. After some time, measurements and welding, it was done, and we went home. It wasn't until the next night when Dad was heading to the Legion like he did most nights. Within a minute he came bursting through the door ripping about the pedals. Mom just looked at him with a look of amusement which made him angrier. He asked her where she got the idea to mess around with the brand new car. Again, with the same look as before she answered, "If you didn't weld the seat to your position but I drive the car more and can't reach the pedals, what am I supposed to do? Now if you want to take your truck tonight you can take the car tomorrow and remove the welding from the seat first so it moves right, then you can take the extensions off the pedals." Quote, "That is exactly what he did too. Do you think he would learn his lesson? Not my dad. He always said, I am not stubborn and I will fight to the death to prove it." Thank you for listening.